Welcome to the Great Shrimp Shoal. Today we'll be getting back to the forest, the newly added tank, and we'll be checking up on the shrimp, the plants, the snails, and everything in between. Please make sure to like and subscribe and turn on notifications, because my shrimp would love to introduce you to their new family. Things have been going well for the forest and its new clutch of green jade cherry shrimp. They are good cleaners, but there's still plenty of food to go around with the biofilm and then the vegetarian pellets that are put in for the shrimp to feed on. The plant life has also grown very quickly. The bit of moss that I put in has grown exponentially, and the Rotala rotundifolia that I planted has gone from just a couple of shoots which were broken to massive clumps of plants that are stretching towards the surface with tons of leaves. Great spots for these shrimp to feed, and hopefully good spots for their fry to hide in once they hatch. The water quality has been steadily getting better since I've started using the distilled water, and I could only imagine how bad it was. I tested a few times before switching things up, and the amount of solids in the tank water were just staggering. Combining water changes with evaporation, the amount of solids were building up over time to a point where I'm sure they were causing the shrimp difficulties. I think that the green jade cherry shrimp are truly some of the most beautiful dwarf shrimp that you can find, and I think they're a bit understated, but just look at the color. It really is a deep green, and it almost looks as though it's some kind of moss or a plant. Take for instance this shrimp in the foreground. It actually has a muted color, a little bit of a matte, but if you've seen some of the other shots of the shrimp, you can see that they do shine and take on a bit of a luster in the proper light. The individuals that I have range from a dark blue all the way to a deep green, and there are variations in between, with some of the males and the younger shrimp having lighter coloring. We're getting really close to the point where these eggs that the females are carrying will begin to hatch any day now, and when they do, I don't know what kind of shrimp will end up coming out, because I do have red and green jade cherry shrimp females and males in this tank coexisting. The entire time, my solo ghost shrimp has been watching all this happening, and who knows what he must be thinking. It must seem like a circus to him, but he soldiers on and searches for food everywhere. My red cherry shrimp female, the last one of her colony, has stopped carrying eggs, so I have no idea if that's due to her age or just because she's not willing to do it. As you can see, the Rotala rotundifolia has put out a couple of runners for each plant, and off of those runners, long roots stretch into the surface, and shoots start branching off from that main plant. The sponge filters, both of them, have become main congregational spots for the colonies of shrimp. As you can see, they like to cling, and then you can see them picking off what I can only assume is biofilm or other debris that's edible. It's not always like this though. I sometimes have to clean the sponge filter because it just gets really mucky, and when I do, they leave the sponge filter in search for better food. This is the Higer sponge filter that I have, and honestly, it was a really good purchase. Very easy to clean. It came with an extra sponge, and by the time it's done and ready, I can put it back into the tank after having only taken it out a few minutes earlier. You can see here with these two individuals some of the differences in the coloring on my jade cherry shrimp. The one on the left is more of a forest green, whereas the one on the right is a deep, mossy sea green. If you're grading your cherry shrimp, some of the details in their coloration has a lot to do with it. For example, some of the highest grade red cherry shrimp have a solid coloring all over their body, and that extends down to their legs, and it's mostly opaque the entire way through. Now, it's important to remember that younger shrimp can be missing most of this coloring, if not all of it. In fact, newborn shrimp can be positively transparent. I've spotted the egg-laying females hiding under the moss and among the Rotala rotundifolia, so I would assume that they're getting ready to give birth if they haven't done so already. When it happens, it'll be very quick. A simple flutter of the pleopods, and then a shrimp will get free, and the egg will end up dropping to the substrate. They'll be really hard to find after that. They're so incredibly small when they hatch. It's a wonder what happened to the previous generations of shrimp that gave birth in the garden, because I think it would take some time before the neon tetra would have been able to find them, and then it's also a matter of catching up with them, and they're very quick and small, so they can get into the tiniest of spaces, often escaping from any predator. So, considering all of those factors, there's a good chance that the water quality was keeping the shrimp colony in the garden from growing at all. I can only hope that I've figured all this out and started using distilled water in time in order to see that the forest doesn't suffer the same fate as the garden. It makes me sad to think that the garden's water quality had degraded day by day to the point where it was getting harder and harder every single moment. At this point, it's just a waiting game. They're off the filter and they're hiding amongst the plants, so they must be trying to give birth and let some of their eggs free. Essentially, what we're looking at right now is a baby shrimp nursery. If the shrimp give birth, this is where it will be, and we're likely to see signs of the smaller fry here almost immediately, because what we're looking at are 3 females, each carrying a clutch of nearly 20 eggs apiece. There, I think I've spotted one. Yep. That is the telltale sign of a shrimplet. You can see it there on the side of the glass. It doesn't at all look like a planaria or an egg from a snail. It's elongated and it has an arch in its back and the distinctive shrimp shape. Now, dwarf shrimp, like the Neocaridina, don't go through any larval stages in their development process, so the baby shrimp hatch out of the eggs and look just like their adult parents. There are a lot of other freshwater and marine shrimp which have vastly more complex development cycles, which involve larval stages and transitions from briny water all the way back into freshwater, so it can be very complicated. Neocaridina shrimp are lucky that it is this simple for them, and it should mean that they are more hardy and able to survive in diverse environments. Picking the shrimp out against the background of the Rotala rotundifolia is nearly an impossible task. And it's more of a waiting game because I know that they're around, and eventually you'll spot them on a leaf or behind a couple of clumps. This group of young shrimplets is still lacking their coloring, so they're much more difficult to sort out from among the Rotala leaves. But if I'm patient, I'll be able to spot them, and the reward is getting to see these tiny little rice-sized shrimp feeding on the biofilm and swimming about the tank. Even when they're on the move, they look like nothing more than a little dust. Here is a great shot of that newborn shrimp. You can clearly see its silhouette even though it is very nearly transparent against the glass and the background of the rest of the tank. Here and there are the copepods. Here's another one coming into the camera right now. And that just gives you an idea of how big these shrimplets are. They're extremely tiny, and it's almost difficult to make out their individual appendages. But everything is there. Each leg and claw, the tail, the pleopods, the antennae, they're all in place. If not, just looking a little bit different than what we would normally see on an adult shrimp. If you look very closely, you can tell that this baby shrimp's antennae have a bend in them, possibly signaling that they're broken or that it is ready to molt, and that is a dead part of the carapace. It is a little bit difficult to search along the bottom of the ground and the substrate for these tiny shrimplets because just a few inches and they can be obscured by the roots and the stalks of the rotala plants. But the glass offers a unique perspective to see under the substrate, and there you can see just at the edge of the glass the detritus worms, and on the stalks of the rotala plants you can see the copepods moving back and forth. Unfortunately, in some instances, I mistake the copepods for the shrimp. There you can see the detritus worm is poking its head out looking for food above the substrate. And that illustrates a little bit of what worried me when I first spotted these invertebrates. The detritus worms move around really quickly, even quicker underground. They're agile and dexterous, moving their head and what I assume is their mouth parts back and forth very quickly. And at the very tip is a smaller spine. Now, despite all I know about the detritus worms and the fact that they are vegetarians and good tank cleaners, their look and appearance worries me with the shrimplets now newly hatched because they look a lot more like a predator than they do a forager or a cleaner. I've actually been trying to capture the interaction between the detritus worms and the copepods when they meet closer to the surface of the substrate because I've imagined that if they were to meet, that the detritus worm would aggress upon the copepods and possibly chase after them. But that is just my imagination. They are probably a lot more docile than they seem. I have hours of this type of footage just searching the bottom of the substrate, looking for these juvenile shrimp because without their color, they look just like the lighter colored sand, and even against the darker objects, they can blend in pretty easily. Well, that just about does it for today. Thank you guys for showing up, and please, before you leave, remember to like and subscribe so that you get notifications about when I get the next video up. It's taken a while to get these baby shrimp into the tank, and honestly, I'd like to follow their development as closely as possible. There's a lot going on in this new 10-gallon tank. Between the copepods, the detritus worms, and the newly born shrimp, there's a lot to cover, and I'm sure we'll get into it next time. Anyway, until I see you next, I hope that you have some sweet shrimpy dreams.